Ladies and gentlemen, hey, hell yeah. Hell yeah. Somebody make sure they get this picture and send it to me so I can Instagram this. Oh my goodness, wait a minute. And I got the Ralph Lauren on. I like saying that, Ralph Lauren. I've known this woman a nice while now. I've had the privilege of performing at both places that she hosted. I want to say it's 5150 North Lincoln. Was that the address?
5115 maybe? Something, or very close, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere.
At the Cafe First, yeah.
Right. And she hosted, she wanted to host Cafe Gallery. Now it's at 2020.
North Oakland.
North Oakland.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Right. Just awesome, man. I was built up for this introduction, and now I'm just sort of speechless. But I think this is what I said. I told you before, it's innovative. You go a step further. I think with the work she did with the periodic table is just genius. I really do. It's trend-setting. It's groundbreaking. She's a great host, and she's accommodating as well. So much so sometimes she has to cut people off and they go too long, but she welcomes you. You come in running in. I mean, just a wonderful person. Enough of the thing, my friend, wonderful poet, Janet Kuypers, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. The reason why I have this studio framed is because I have been doing, I've been doing poems for every element in the periodic table. I don't know what made me decide to start doing this, but I have. And I finished it. I'm done with them. I've got them all done. Can you believe it? Especially the ones that you don't know anything about. You have to write a poem about it so you come up with something. But what I've got in this set of poems I was going to read for you, and I will say, I've got all of the ones I'm going to read in this chapbook. I believe there are people there, and there is a feature there. If somebody would like an extra chapbook, if you would like to pass it to anybody who would want it. It's my last one. So she's like, me. Or you can also get it downloadable free as a PDF file, but you just don't get it in print, I'm sorry. But the reason why I have this goofy old frame is because that thing was called Visionaries Behind the Stars. And that's because a lot of the elements that I'm working on right now are ones that they don't know anything about. They're ones that are synthesized elements, and a lot of the things I'm writing about are things about the people that they are named after, and so I'm highlighting those people and the whole stories that were behind that, or the locations, or that kind of thing. So that's a good reason why I had that frame. So just that you're aware. This first one is, I'm going to tell you the numbers, 106 in the periodic table, and it is Seaborgium. I've always loved the sea. When standing at these Pacific shores, I'm always intoxicated by the action there, the vibrancy, the sense of life. I'm always drawn to the ideas of learning, to California's desire to explore and discover. There was a scientist, Glenn Seaborg, who later worked through the UFC Berkeley. And when it came to discovery in California, Seaborg really had a hold on the chemistry market. Because during his career, he did theoretical work in the development of the actinide series. You know, some of them are broken apart, some of them are the actinide series. And he worked on the development of the actinide series in the periodic table, and he even helped discover 10 elements, many of those in that actinide series. But one element that wasn't in the actinide series that he helped discover, element 106, that was the element that people petitioned to be named after him, because of all that he discovered through the periodic table. But scientists in Dubna, Russia, also were wanting to claim the naming rights for element 106. And naming an element after Seaborg caused quite a stir. Because, you can't actually, elements are only named after dead people, they all said. But the Americans actually pulled it off, and they got this new element named Seaborgium. Transuranium elements like Seaborgium are only artificially made with particle accelerators. And I know those scientists, after finding elements that way, only acquire 1 or 2 atoms, so they can only guess the element's properties by their locations in their periodic table. I mean, Seaborgium's isotopes have half-lives of only like seconds long, and there's no use we know of for Seaborgium other than scientific research. Kind of like scientists like Seaborg or Albert Georstow, or the leader of that Seaborgium discovery team. But after the element was named Seaborgium, and since Seaborgium is the only element named after a living person, it may have been possible to send Glenn Seaborg a letter addressed in chemical elements. Sent it to Seaborgium in Laurentium for his Laurentium Berkeley lab in the city of Berkeley in the state of California, and if that letter is going to be mailed from outside the U.S., in the country of Americium. I don't know if any letters like this actually got through to him, but for a man with that many discoveries under his belt, sending letters to him using only periodic table elements almost seems like icing on the cake. Periodic table. You didn't know it would be like a science lesson while you were here. But this one is a cool one, and I'm giving up for the ladies. This one, I like this one. This one is element 109. It's called Meitnerium. What do you know about this lady? Performance artists and feminists alike will jump at the chance to explain that women aren't treated fairly in this world. Women in the workplace make 70-some cents to the man's dollar, and if they're married, they're still expected to take care of the kids and cook the meals and clean the house. As a woman, I can tell you that I'm objectified nearly every time I go outside for a long walk with horn honks and cat calls. And objectively, it is rough when the cards seem stacked against you as a woman trying to get ahead in the world. And I hate to be the person who squashes the ego of all women out there, but if you think it's rough for you women now, think of the uphill battles you'd have to climb if you lived in, say, a century ago. That was a time when women didn't have a right to vote. Why on earth would they want to even go to school? Unless it was, to be a teacher or a nurse, when their place is at home to live to agree with their breadwinner, husband, father, patriarch, master. Because not all of you may have a scientific mind. There was one woman, Liza Meitner, born to a Jewish family in Austria 10 years before Hitler. She was blocked in so many ways to achieve any of her goals in life. Because she actually got her doctoral degree in physics in the days when women weren't even allowed to attend schools of higher education, Professor Planck in Berlin, who actually rejected any woman wanting to attend his lectures, he allowed her in, and in 1 year, Meitner even became his assistant. She later worked without a salary before she worked in Prague as an associate professor. She was the first woman in Germany to become a full professor in physics. She eventually co-discovered nuclear fission with Otto Hahn. I mean, Albert Einstein even praised her by calling her the German Marie Curie. And yeah, as Adolf Hitler came to power, and most of her colleagues emigrated from Germany after they were forced to resign their posts, Meitner just immersed herself in her work until she witnessed the Anschluss, the annexation of Austria into Germany, that she was forced in 1938 to flee to Holland and then Sweden. But a chemist where she worked named Kurt Hess, he was an avid Nazi, and he even informed the authorities that she was about to flee, so it was lucky she escaped. Meitner even said she escaped with only 10 marks for money in her pocket, but before she left, Otto Hahn gave her a diamond ring for her escape in case she needed to bribe the frontier guards. She didn't need to use it in her escape, so that ring was later given and worn by her nephew's wife. But after her assistance with nuclear fission, she didn't want to think of this use as a weapon, and she even refused to offer to work on the Manhattan Project. The sad thing is that she just co-discovered nuclear fission but it was her male co-worker, Otto Hahn, who was awarded the 1944 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the discovery of nuclear fission. Some historians say Meitner should have been awarded that Nobel Prize with him, but keep in mind that it was a man's world back then. Though she was nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize 3 times, she has received awards in later years, in addition to having craters in the moon and on Venus named after her, in addition to element 109. And yeah, element 109, meitnerium, is a highly radioactive synthetic element. Its radioactivity makes me think of that nuclear fission she co-discovered with Otto Hahn. They also discovered the element protactinium, actually. But when it comes to naming element 109, that was the only proposed name, and meitnerium was the only element ever named specifically for a non-mythological woman. And really, there is so little of this meitnerium that people can only guess its properties, but learning and discovering seemed to be something Meitner was all about, facing all odds and achieving so much. I think I'm going to ask my husband to dance with me on this one, because I'd like to start this with a song that we actually danced to for our wedding. So I'm going to be cheesy and ask you to come up and dance. And that means I'm going to have to sing it too. Uh-oh. Oh, are you ready, darling? Will you dance with me, sir? Should I be up here, or should I? We'll just be close. The streets of town were paved with stars. It was such a romantic affair. And as we kissed and said goodnight, a nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. A nightingale sang in Berkeley Square. Berkeley. B-E-R-K-E-L-E-Y. Because on the other side of the pond, the British have a different way of saying things, like the Anglo-Irish physicist George Berkeley. That's B-E-R-K-E-L-E-Y, like you're barking up the wrong tree. But when a city and university in California was named after this philosopher, well, the pronunciation changed after across the ocean from Berkeley to, and because the scientists worked on at the University of Berkeley, they decided to name element 79 after the university, and it's actually the only one of 2 elements in the periodic table actually named after a university. So I don't really know how you're supposed to pronounce it. Should I say Berkeleyum, like the States, or the British Berkelium? Because I've been trying to learn a thing or two about Berkeleyum, Berkelium. And the thing is, it's never found in its pure form, because this transuranic radioactive and artificially produced element is a soft, silvery white actinide metal that sometimes has long half-lives through its isotopes that range from microseconds to several days to 330 days to 9 years to 1,380 years. So maybe I'm only meant to learn about parts of this element by these fleeting dances that I once had, like scientists have with Berkeley. Strange in the small amount of space we could like dip or dance perfectly. Let's say this element, when I did tell you that was 79, like you people are really keeping tabs on these things, but this one, and a lot of them are much higher in the table. This one is 108 in the periodic table, and this is hassium. Hassium is a periodic table element that was discovered in 1984. Apple launched its first Macintosh computer in 1984. That's also the same year the first planet outside of our solar system was discovered. 1984 is the year Nelson Mandela saw his wife for the first time in 22 years. It's the same year Walter Payton achieved the most rushing yards, and the year Michael Jackson's hair was set on fire taping a Pepsi commercial. It was the year McDonald's sold its 50 billionth hamburger. Then again, it's also the same year vegetarian Fred Rogers, you know, from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the same year he donated his red sweater to the Smithsonian. Although it had existed for decades, 1984 is the year the AIDS virus was technically identified. Don't get Orwellian on me, but it was a busy year, 1984. Named for the German state of Hesse, this radioactive synthetic element, that's an element that can be created in a lab but not found in nature, it seems to have a half-life. That's the time it takes for something to fall to half of its value because of radioactive decay. It has a half-life of only seconds. But give the scientists some credit. There have only been a little over 100 atoms of this transactinide element hassium synthesized to date. I know the Russian scientists in Dubna tried to synthesize this element in 1978, but Darmstadt scientists in Germany, they got it together in 1984. So, another radioactive synthetic element. So what? Is probably what you're thinking right now. And yeah, when it comes to its apparent only value for scientific research, you're probably right. But still, check out this one cool sounding fact point about element 108. According to calculations, 108 is a proton magic number, which means that it is the number of protons that will arrange into a complete shell in an atomic nucleus. And it's the proton magic number for deformed nuclei. That means nuclei that are far from spherical. That means nuclei like hassium-270 may be a deformed doubly magic nucleus. Okay, it's more science stuff, but it's cool to think that an isotope of hassium can still have a fully arranged nuclear shell in its atom while still remaining deformed and look totally out of sync. It makes sense for a radioactive element that we created. It makes sense that it's a little off base, but still somehow together. So I guess it's kind of cool that we were able to create an element on the earth-shaking year of 1984, and that we make something so off-kilter, but somehow still perfectly in balance, considering everything it can potentially do if we ever make enough of this radioactive stuff. Great. I have only 5 of these for you, but I'm going to end with, I'm going to start by, this is number 105 in the periodic table. This is W, and because I didn't think he'd be here, and because I'd always say this to my open micers, I'm hoping that I would sample in Joffrey from quoting him at the beginning. This is Joffrey Stewart that you're going to hear, but this is WDB 105. Over the years, the U.S. and Russia have fought over all sorts of things. Thermonuclear bombs, intercontinental ballistic missiles to carry those bombs, even getting men into space, or winning the most Olympic medals, or even making new chemical elements. You may think of the Cold War when I mention the US and Russia, the Soviet Union, but you should probably also think of the Transfermium Wars, where both countries spilled a lot of ink in an effort to come out the winner. Because it was both Dubna in the USSR and Berkeley, California in the USA that claimed the discovery of this element. But after the Cold War, the IUPAC, don't make this long enough for you, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, the group that decides the names for elements, they said the credit for this discovery should be shared between the two. But if the two countries no longer could battle over who discovered it first, they could at least then argue over the naming rights for the elements. The Soviets wanted to call it Niels Bohrium for Danish nuclear physicist Niels Bohr, but Americans wanted to call it Hahnium for the late German scientist Otto Hahn. So, American and Western Europeans started calling the element Hahnium, while the Soviet Union and Eastern Bloc countries went on calling it Niels Bohrium. So the IUPAC gave the name Unilpentium 105 UNP as a temporary name. Though the two countries still disagreed over the naming of this new element, the IUPAC then decided on Dubnium to honor the Russian discovery location. I think the only reason it got to be named after Dubna is because America had so many elements already named for them, like Berkelium, Californium, Americium, and if the elements around 105, Rutherfordium and Seaborgium, were US, Dubnium can have a little Americans have this element to offset all those American discoveries. So, yeah, even after all these decades of competition and mistrust, a third party had come in repeatedly to try to settle our squabbles, kind of like the UN. But now that we've got the name figured out for element 105, maybe now we can learn about Dubnium, right? So I did a little research, and lo and behold, scientists haven't been able to figure this element out either. Melting point? Unknown. Boiling point? Unknown. Density? Unknown. I guess that's what we get for battling with the Soviet Union, well, or eventually later Russia, to try to create a highly radioactive metal that doesn't even occur in nature. Only a few atoms have ever been made, so I guess our creation is for scientific research only. But wait a minute. We just created a radioactive element. Should we worry if this spreads that we might turn into a radioactive planet? Will our progenitors be a radioactive species? Well, that might sound like a thrill for a comic book guy, but Dubnium is so unstable that it would decompose so quickly that it would never affect humans. And because of Dubnium's half-life, it's only a half-minute long. That's short, by the way. There's no point in even worrying about its effects on the environment either. So, I'm afraid, sorry, comic book guy, but this won't turn us into a radioactive people or kill us by radiation. Maybe the United States and Russia once worked on trying to blow each other up with nuclear bombs and missiles, but when it came to the Dubnium battles and the Transfermium wars, maybe, for once, we were both trying to work at the same time on creating something for science that will only help us learn. So did you feel like you learned something? Was it all right? What do you think?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you. Called Cafe Gallery, and it's Gallery Cabaret. It's every other Wednesday. Next Wednesday we're off. The next one is September 24th. It is the only one that's going to be from 9 to 11. We're usually from 7 to 9. Buddha 309 is the feature. Yeah, which would be triple plus awesome. If you want to know anything about it, you can always bug me at www.chaoticarts.org/thecafe. We have weekly podcasts, and you can have your videos, and that's why I've done crazy video stuff, because these will be podcasts and YouTube clips that you can see about it if you want to know anything online. And thank you.